Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, Endrick could leave Real Madrid on loan in January, but is his time in Spain a warning for other youngsters offered huge moves? What makes him a weird striker prospect, and what's his best destination? Then we look at the task ahead of Nuno Espirito Santo at West Ham. We discuss Barcelona playing Villarreal in Miami and the future of Europe's top leagues and MLS. And we've got Mark Guéhi back again, and this time linked with Bayern Munich. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another Wednesday Transfer Flow, and joining me today is Hayden Van Brewer. How are you doing, Hayden?
I'm doing well. How are you, Patrick?
I'm good, man. You just offered such an interesting take off camera that now I've been chewing it over for and I'm finding it hard to get into the zone. You were talking about combining the Belgian league and the Dutch league, which everyone should be on board with, except for nationalists. So no nationalists in football. Everyone will be fine with it.
Yeah, not sure that will happen. That might be a topic that we discuss in a bit more detail later. Some of the logistics that it would take, sort of behind the scenes, to make something like this work. What would be the benefits? Both to teams and to the league. Hopefully, more leverage for broadcasting deals. Not something that's imminently on the cards or in the news right now, but the kind of thing that could be, hopefully a really interesting topic for football fans.
Yeah, well, today we've actually got quite a few juicy topics. As you say, we will come on to some related stuff to that later. But first, we wanted to talk about Real Madrid and Endrick in particular. Rumors going around that he might be loaned out in January, and it makes sense. Like, he's not playing at all so far under Xabi Alonso. And to be honest, it's not like he played a bunch last year. He got 360 minutes in the league last year. Before we get into just the player himself and the places he's been linked to and the kind of fit he is, what does this say about young players making the leap to big clubs so early? Because he was such a big deal. Like, he moved to Real Madrid, or Real Madrid tied up that deal for him when he was just about 15, 16 years old. I think it was back then. And obviously they've done this before. Like, we saw this happen with Rodrygo. We saw this happen with Vinny, though they were a little bit older. But we also saw them do it with like Rainier, and he hasn't really gone anywhere. But Barcelona did it with Vitor Roque, and he's gone back to Brazil, and now he's doing pretty well. But it feels like a bunch of these young players are making leaps to big clubs very early on in their career. Real Madrid are doing it again now with Franco Mastantuono. Do we think that there is a problem with players doing this? Like, it's understandable they want to do this. They can get paid. They go to a huge team. But what's the downside for these players?
Yeah, obviously the downside is future earnings, is career development. It's all these sides of it. So it's a challenge because the clubs want to get these players in early. They know that these are players that they might sign now for 30 to 40 million, who might be worth double or treble that in 3 to 5 years' time. And they don't want to miss the boat. They also know that they might not be able to afford those players. And I think there's also a little bit of an arms race thing, that they know that the only other teams that these players can go to are direct rivals. If Real Madrid doesn't sign them, they'll go to Barca. If Barca doesn't sign them, they'll go to Real Madrid. Or, again, looking at the other teams, that's sort of probably how they're feeling about it. I think on the player side, obviously these players are looking to earn money that can be not just game changing for them as an individual, but can be create like generational wealth. Like signing a 5 or 6 year contract for one of these top clubs is like an insane amount of money, not even to mention the name recognition that comes with signing for these teams and the endorsement deals and the rest of that. So you can understand the desire from both sides. I think if we take a step back, the really important thing here is responsibility. And I think the responsibility can exist on both sides. I think if you're a club and you sign a player, you should have a plan for how that player will develop, how that player can be used, what could go really well for the player, what could not go well for the player, both in terms of where they're at right now, what are their strengths and weaknesses, what do they need to improve on, what are they already really good at. And then the other side of it is like, what is their injury history? What is available in the team right now? Where could they play? Do we have a space for them in the first team or the second team? If we're going to plan on loaning this player out for a period of time, then what type of loans are a really good fit for them? What are the types of things that we feel work or will be most comfortable for the player. And I think sometimes on the team side, sometimes those things are an afterthought because there's maybe not as much communication between the scouting and recruitment and the player pathway, player development side that there needs to be when you're spending this kind of money on top talent, but also on young players that are moving outside of their home country to the other side of the world, to a place where they've gone from being the biggest star from wherever they're from has ever seen to now just being another player in the mix. And so I think there's an adjustment there. From the player side, there's going to be people around the player who are pushing the player to get paid to make the most money possible to do that. And obviously that's really important. But I think we've seen this, and this is one of the ones where sometimes the whole ex-footballer thing gets a bad rep. I think it's one of the things where we've seen like a player like Erling Haaland, whose father was a really ex-top pro. We've seen his career path has gone almost as perfectly as possible, you would say. You would say he was a top talent, but he's also been managed in a really good way. And there's some responsibility on the player side too. And having someone with real experience in the industry who knows maybe about where the player's at, who knows a lot about the player sort of emotionally behind the scenes and what kind of things they'll respond well to. Those are all needed for the player to help pick the right club for themselves. And again, if the club does sign the player, the clubs need to have a plan there too. So there's a lot of responsibility on both sides. And I think both of these things are things that players and teams should be more aware of in making these really big decisions for players like top talents like Endrick.
It does seem like you would expect that clubs' incentives would be aligned with players, right? As in, like, they would want to develop you really well. They'd want to protect their investment. But that hasn't really been the case recently. You know, certainly with Chelsea, like, they feel like a really difficult team in this because you get guys like Anselmino who leaves Boca in 2024 and has played 150 odd minutes since that happened. It seems like teams are much more willing to throw money away on these guys on the understanding that maybe one of them will become a star. But it's kind of weird with players like Endrick when the price is so high that at most you can really hope for, you know, a 2 times multiplier like on that transfer fee. Like Endrick costs supposedly 60 mil. Even if he turns into the best striker in the world, you're only going to get double that. The other part of it is that what is the sweet spot in how much we play these youngsters? Because we obviously talk about overplaying youngsters. We also talk about them not getting enough minutes. Real Madrid are kind of idiosyncratic with this stuff as well, because when Rodrygo and Vinícius came in, they didn't loan them out. You know, they gave them some minutes, but they really just kept them with the first team and tried to get them up to speed. I guess we could be seeing that with Endrick, but what's the sweet spot in how much these guys play, and how do you calculate that difference between getting him used to our tactical system, getting him used to the players he's going to work with and the manager, and getting him as many minutes as possible playing competitive football?
Yeah, I think let's reference some of the conversations we've already had here. So like I think one thing that Ted has really talked a lot about is that like as a club, you have finances as a resource, but you have playing time as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important thing. How you use that. You want to use the players you have. You need to be both thinking about winning games now and winning games later. A lot of times clubs have this sort of split between the coaches who work with the players day in and day out. Their job is to win now. The sporting structure, sporting director, things like that, their plan is to build something for the future. And winning now is good, but winning sustainably over 3 to 5 years is really better, and that's their job. And those forces maybe butt heads a bit and balance each other out over the long term. I think those are some of the trade-offs, but for the individual players themselves, finding this balance is going to be different player to player. Like, for example, I think one of the things that came out around Esteval, who's looked exceptional at Chelsea, who's again come also from Palmeiras and maybe made the jump. Some of the stories coming out around him from, you know, I think translated by Joao Pedro, were that he was really struggling with the load of training, with the physicality. I think you see Esteval and you see he's like a very skinny, you know, he's a kid still, right? He's really skinny. He's a bit small. It's going to take him some time for his body to change and develop and grow. And when we talk about planning that, like, these are some of the things you need to be aware of like, but we think that this guy probably needs about 15 pounds and he needs to have a physical capacity that looks like this. And it's probably going to take him, from our sports scientist experience, 18 to 24 months to actually get him there. So what does his playing time look like before and after we think he sort of gets to this point, right? I think that's a really interesting balance. For the most part, I think coaches aren't going to be thinking about this. Like, the problem is that this is falling into the category of what sporting directors are thinking. And I think they need to have these direct conversations beforehand, because the coaches are just going to say, I'm going to train everybody. I'm going to treat everyone equal. There will be equal opportunity. Competition will decide who are the best players and who play and how much they play. Like, a lot of times coaches will say that, like, outside of rotating, because coaches will say, I have to rotate because I have too many competitions. But otherwise they'll say, I just want to play my best guys. I want to play the guys that earn it in training, that work really hard, that follow directions well. And that can be an 18-year-old and that can be a 36-year-old. And I don't really care. And I think that's the real challenge here is some of these players are able to figure it out, or they have injuries in the team that give them an opportunity and then they can sort of take on a role, or they're a really good fit for what the coach wants, right? Like Mastantuono, who we've mentioned earlier, has looked like a really great fit. Not just that he's the only one. Like, I thought him or Arda Güler, one of these guys will play and they'll rotate. No, they're both playing at the same time. Like, Xabi Alonso loves this type of player. And so that player gets an opportunity, whereas Endrick maybe doesn't fit exactly the type of thing and misses out on that opportunity. Well, if you're Real Madrid, you paid a big fee for Mastantuono and for Endrick. So you want to, as a sporting side, care about the development of these things long term. And in the same way that you've found the right playing time. Now, finding the playing time for Mastantuono has been easier because he's sort of won this sort of inner squad competition, or he's someone that the manager feels has done that. It's easy to do it when guys do that. You go, yeah, I'll give opportunity to a young player if they're better than my alternative, no problem. But the other players who maybe aren't quite there, part of getting them there is giving them opportunities in games so that they can see what that's like, see that feeling, also fail, and then come back to the training ground and learn from it. And so, yeah, finding that balance physically is going to be different for player by player, but I think the gap tends to be really big. It tends to be this young guy is as essential as the captain of the team and they're playing all the time, or they're just not quite there. If they get there and they're able to pass someone, then great. But otherwise, either I'll train them or I'll loan them. And that's really been one of the interesting things, is teams holding on to these players. Again, you mentioned a guy like Vinny. Phil Foden, I think, is like one of the most prime examples. Like, Phil Foden didn't go out and play in League One and the Championship and stuff like that. Like, Phil Foden just stayed and trained with Pep Guardiola and deemed that could get him the competition to develop him in a healthy way. And I think that type of decision making is what's going to look different for different players. Like, some players may need to go away from home, go away from what's comfortable to enhance their game. And some might just need more and more reps. Like, Phil Foden might just need more and more time on the training ground with Kevin De Bruyne. That might have been the thing that he needed to really see what it takes, whereas a different player might have needed something different. And it's important for those decisions to be made. The hard part at the club is that the people who often are looking after those things are not the people who are coaching and assigning the playing time for the club itself.
Sure. And I mean, the thing with Endrick as well is that he's had so few minutes, and there have been consistent rumours about him getting out on loan or permanently, that it does feel like this is not a plan that has been discussed and that everybody is okay with. I mean, it is a difficult scenario in that he arrives at the same time as Mbappe, and then a year later Alonso comes in, and that really is the first time that Real Madrid have started trying to do things very differently in more than a decade. Like, during the whole Zidane Ancelotti time, it was kind of like those guys would take the squad that they got, really, and now they're trying to play in a radically different style. They also played in a really idiosyncratic way versus other top teams. Now they're trying to play in a radically different style, and if Alonso doesn't like him, then that's kind of it. Alonso is clearly saying like, I need to do this my way if I'm going to be your coach. So that's some of the background, but also it feels like Endrick, when they were closing the deal for him, felt less unusual as a striker prospect than he does now, because the meta is moving back towards big guys. And not big guys who all do the same thing in the way, you used to have a big guy who was like, he can play a bit of back to goal and he gets up and wins headers in the box. And that's what our big guy does. Like now there are all sorts of different big guys, like big guys who run the channels, big guys who do hold up and creation, like big guys who are just like shot monsters. We've got all these different players. Actually, Scouted recently, I really recommend their big deep dive into jumbo forwards and how, a guy like Voltemade matches up to Havertz, matches up to Kleindienst, like all this kind of stuff. But Endrick is a small guy. Like he's 5'8". He's still 19. But to me, when you're that kind of striker, like he's pretty two-footed, he's got great power. It's hard to speak confidently about his stats because he doesn't have a lot of output. But I do think while I would not be content using his stats to describe his level, I'm quite happy as them as indications of kind, So I think we can use the stats to describe the kind of player he is. And as strikers go, like he's pretty conventional, right? Like he's not that involved in play. He did do some dribbling when he was younger in Brazil, but not particularly high success. Hasn't really done it in Spain. He can create a little bit, but he's not that kind of really creative facilitating forward. He doesn't run the channel as much. I mean, like he is a normal centre forward who gets touches in the box. He gets shots. He does get fouled a little bit. And when I look at his size, I think that now, if you're going to be a striker of that size, like 5'8", you kind of need to have one of these bars be really, really green, right? Like you need to get so many shots that you're just undeniable. You need to be a great channel runner. You need to have special link-up play. You need to have amazing carrying ability. Like when you look around the forwards who are about this size, who've been top-level forwards, I mean, some of these came through earlier, like Gabriel Jesus, but Gabriel Jesus has pretty amazing ability to dribble through the center. Someone like Openda gets a load of shots and runs the channels like a winger. Lautaro Martinez is just amazing at racking up shots and expected goals and is pretty good at basically everything, really. So Endrick, it feels like he needs to show he can do one of those things to a high level. And right now, I just have no idea what it is. I don't know about you, whether you have a clearer read on him as like what value he's going to offer at the highest level.
So I think with Endrick, he's a really strong ball striker. He's someone who I think has shown the ability to shoot the ball really hard for a small player and can get on it and do some things. We haven't maybe seen that to be the top level ability yet. I think ball carrying is maybe more where we expect to see him sort of exceed as a guy that can receive it in tight space, move, either slide someone or shoot himself and make something happen there. For that reason, I think I'm looking around at options for him and thinking he maybe needs to play more in a front two, as opposed to just being like your target number 9 through the middle, have him do responsible for a ton of pressing and receiving long passes and that kind of thing. I think that's probably not a fit. Again, we're still not totally sure about the player. Again, this is why I thought when Xabi Alonso came in, they were playing that 3-5-2 a bit when they were in the Club World Cup. I thought we'd see a little bit more of that, actually. I thought we'd see Endrick getting some minutes through the middle there and that sort of setup. Again, Madrid have kind of gone away from that and played more of a back four, maybe more of a standard Real Madrid sort of setup there. So he doesn't look like he's going to get those opportunities right now. Looking at him, it's going to be a little bit tricky, and it's trying to figure out which team can have a setup that suits him and find a strike partner that sort of suits him. And I don't really know what that looks like exactly right now. The priority for him, I think, is getting minutes on the field in men's senior football in a league where he can make an impact and he will score goals and he'll probably make mistakes, and he just needs the opportunity to play consistently to get himself to where Real Madrid want him to be. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a tricky one to figure out that balance, because it's exactly what you're saying. We know some things about the player, but there's also a lot of gray area right now where we're like, we're not really sure. We kind of just need to see it.
Yeah, like there are some Italian sides where I could see it. You know, like when you look at the goals that Højlund has been scoring at Napoli, for example, you're like, Endrick can do this. Like it's not a size thing. And actually, the way that Højlund played, you know, as a youngster at Atalanta, where you're like, your job is pretty much to be the guy that no one's watching, like you're low touch, but you just get in space and you get the shot. Like Endrick could feasibly do that. I also think the Bundesliga, you know, I would have liked the Bundesliga as a destination for him, you know, but you look at Dortmund, they're pretty well stocked. Leipzig went out and got strikers this summer, you know, Romelu and Harder. Leverkusen would be interesting, but probably the worst stylistic fit for him of those top Bundesliga sides. Like Frankfurt have a bunch of guys, Stuttgart have a bunch of guys, but Frankfurt, if he'd gone there and played in a front two, where he has the space to run in behind, he can really rip shots quickly. He gets the ball out of his feet and hits it really quickly. I was like, Bundesliga would be great for you, man. But to me, this feels like a situation, we've talked about this before, about players using analytics in their contract negotiations. And I thought, well, this is a situation where you'd want to use analytics to find some teams that might make sense, right? You know, make the case. Is there a team that create chances but are underperforming in attack where it's kind of going to be easy to go in and shine? Is there a team that wants to play with two strikers or needs more pace or plays in a league with more transition running or just where there's a vacancy? You know, like then you can take that big pay cut to go and play for, you know, the sixth best team in Italy or the fifth best team in Germany, knowing that you should get opportunities to really shine and then to be able to get a bigger move after that. I mean, the thing is, what we're describing here, everything that we're describing here does not line up with the team he's most heavily linked to right now, which is West Ham. Like West Ham just feels like a horrible mix for him. Like I just don't, West Ham, I don't really want to come in there as a forward right now. They're one of the worst attacking sides in the Premier League. You know, they're fourth bottom for expected goals. And I think that even if Nuno improves that, it's probably unlikely to be through playing your nimble shot getting forward in behind. Like they don't get a lot of touches in the penalty area. They don't have a lot of passing into the penalty area. And I kind of think, and you see Bowen's numbers come down this season as well. Like shots down, touching the penalty area down, shot quality down. And I think, well, what's the argument that Endrick's going to succeed where Bowen is struggling? It just feels like Nuno's going to try something else. Like if he's looking for a striker in January, he's going to be looking for the kind of striker who is a big lump who wins headers, right? Rather than this little nippy guy who really hits it hard but is unproven.
Yeah, I think actually, like Nuno could be the Fulkrug whisperer. Actually,
Sure.
is what could happen. Like he might be the guy to salvage Fulkrug. Chris Wood is a pretty different player. Like I heard a great description from a Nottingham Forest staff member that Chris Wood looks like a battering ram, but he's actually like a gazelle that just wants to like run in behind and like get those little breakaways and things like that. That like actually that's something that he does really well. He's a really good runner. He's intelligent with his angles and cover shadow and things like that. Like he's this really dynamic guy, but because his name is Wood and he's a big unit, he sort of gets pigeonholed maybe a bit more than he should. And yeah, I wonder if Fulkrug could be a guy that Nuno is able to get a lot more out of. I think Nuno, to solidify this team, will probably try to play 4-5-1. He'll play with three kind of true central midfielders, and there won't be a spot really for the second striker unless it's off the wing. But there's already off the wing in Jared Bowen, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I think exactly that. Like West Ham sounds like the type of team that has the finances to do it and may want to add goals to their team, but this is probably not the one that does it. The other two teams that I saw linked were Valencia and Real Sociedad. Sociedad has Oyarzabal up top, so I'm sort of like probably not the right fit for Endrick to play with. Maybe a guy that like, again, a guy that kind of can play on his own or with a strike partner. He's a really interesting dynamic forward. I think he's been a great fit when he's played for the Spanish national team as well. He's been like a super underrated part of that. But I look at the Valencia team that plays 4-4-2, a guy who he could play with in Danjuma, who is like a little bit creator and winger, a little bit direct and run in behind, a little bit of a nasty guy with an edge. Like it feels like of those three teams, Valencia is the one that I look at. Now, Valencia is not a team that creates tons and tons and is not super high up on the table in terms of like XG4 or even XG difference and things like that. So there's definitely some risk. But for a loan, I kind of see it. Now, I don't know exactly how the finances can work there. And that's always going to be the challenge here is that the bigger teams have more finances and is going to come with more expectations. So we'll have to see a little bit how that plays out. But of those three teams, Valencia feels to me like a much stronger fit than West Ham. While at the same time, like maybe it's a good one to mention. Like pretty excited to have Nuno go in there and feel like that this gives West Ham a real chance. It feels like a move we would have expected. It's a move that we saw, and I think there's a real opportunity for Nuno to steady the ship at least.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like that there aren't Premier League clubs who could potentially work for Endrick. Like, if he went to like Brentford, I'd be fine with that, man. You know, like that's a team where they are going to be able to get him chances in space, that, or they're going to at least try and do that. Or even if you go to Bournemouth, where you have a wide guy like Semenyo who takes some of the pressure of hold up play and winning aerial duels off you. Like you do need someone there who's just a nuisance, and when he gets the ball in a little bit of space, can get the shot away quickly. Like that kind of thing, I'd be fine with. But those teams are also, maybe Brentford are a little bit, but they're not facing the degree of risk that West Ham do. And I just think, you know, West Ham this season, like only Sunderland getting a higher proportion of their shots from dead ball situations. And last season, only Ipswich and Southampton got a higher share of their shots from dead ball situations than Forest under Nuno. And I just think like this is the kind of stuff that he's going to come in and do. I mean, I guess if we leave Endrick behind, when you say playing a 4-5-1, you know, with like three conventional midfielders, the West Ham have the midfielders to do that, you know, because like they went away and spent nearly 40 million this summer on Mateus Fernandes. They've obviously got Paquetá as well, who's this weird guy who his whole career has been this kind of 8-10 tweener. And Fernandes is kind of the same type of thing, really, but is like younger. They went and got Magassa in the summer. Okay, great. Magassa is like, he's centre back depth and he's just like a ball winner in the centre of the park. Cool. But after that, you've got Souček, you've got Ward-Prowse. And I think if you want to run out the really, really, like this weekend, like last weekend, they went to Arsenal. You expect them to run out the defensive lineup. And they went 4-1-4-1 with Magassa behind Paquetá and Fernandes. And I was like, that's kind of all they can do. They don't really have much more than that, unless they change formation. And I do think you could consider a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 or something. It would probably help the wing backs, but you don't really have enough centre backs to cover for the fact you've got three centre backs basically. I don't know. Everywhere I look in this squad, I think you're at least one guy short.
And a lot of those guys feels like some of that's what went out in the window. Like they got a good fee for Agard, but if they were trying to make those choices at center back, he's a guy that can help there. If they're trying to go too flat in the midfield, Edson Alvarez is a guy that would make a lot of sense for that.
Sure.
So, but this is some of what happens when you're maybe in between styles, formations, and coaches. So that's going to be Nuno's job, just to work with what's there and steady it. Another team, just to kind of close the Endrick one, would have, in my mind, is possibly a Crystal Palace loan. A few months,
Sure.
Glasner, another attacking option that could play either. Again, we've seen, I think, Eddie Nketiah has been more of an off the bench kind of role, and he's maybe even more of a poacher type than Endrick. But Eddie Nketiah is sort of a guy that has made an impact there. And you can imagine Endrick, who could either play as a striker with guys underneath him, or who could play as one of the underneath ones. If it's him underneath, Sarr and Mateta or something like that, that could be a pocket of space that makes sense for him. For West Ham, agree with everything you're saying. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but they also won't play teams as strong as Arsenal every week, luckily.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of that could be fun. Yeah, in terms of like versatility, they actually do have the fullbacks that could go fullback or wingback. It's exactly what you're saying. It's center back where you're like, we're maybe a little bit light there if you're West Ham, because I think Walker Peters has played loads as a wingback, and Doof on the left side. Like when that guy gets moving, he is like a train. Like he is really impressive. Some of his crossing while running at full speed, I was like, this guy, the way he wraps his foot around the ball when he's running that fast is really impressive to me. So yeah, he's a guy that I could see as a wingback, but also he's doing it right now as a fullback already.
Sure.
So there's some options there. And I think, yeah, there's enough in this West Ham team. I think we talked about the gap when these teams are coming up. The West Ham team is still a team that has like Brazilian internationals and full-fledged guys in it compared to these teams that have come up and are not as strongly staffed. And yeah, the job for Nuno is, can we make that robust enough to get us through the year?
Yeah, I think they've basically got a Magassa plus one it through to January in central midfield, and then just bring in somebody who can ball win. But then I don't know if they'll even want to do that, having spent so much money on Fernandes. So it's a difficult situation. Like this is the advantage of something like a 3-4-3, right? In that your midfielders don't have to cover that much ground, and they don't have to be amazing kind of defense splitting passers. They need to just be in the right positions and win the ball, and then hopefully play relatively simple passes. I mean, I do think, like, as managers go, Nuno is the sensible choice for them to go and get. And the run of games they've got coming up, you know, getting an international break now is great for them. And then they've got a run of games where they've got Brentford, Leeds, Newcastle, Burnley, Bournemouth. 3 of those are at home. But they need to start making some hay out of those games, right? Because they're in serious trouble otherwise. And when I look at their squad, I think, okay, the top end talent here is better than the top end talent on some of the other relegation rivals. But the balance of the squad, I think, is significantly worse than it is for half the teams they're going to be up against this season.
Yeah.
Scares me.
No, I agree with that. Completely agree with that.
Okay, well, shall we move on then from Endrick and from West Ham to actually a more depressing story, which is Barcelona and Villarreal have got permission from UEFA to play a league game in Miami in December. We've also got Milan versus Como in Perth in Australia in February. Now, UEFA says that they reluctantly agreed to this. They were like, we don't have a legal framework to challenge this. So we've agreed to it, but we don't want to do it. This is a bit scary. Like, there's obviously been opposition from fan groups. They say this is going to inflict long-lasting harm on the sport, and this is going to like undermine the success of the leagues, and we need a regulatory framework to protect domestic competition. Like, that is definitely true. Like, if the issue is UEFA can't effectively go against this kind of move, then hopefully this might persuade FIFA and UEFA to get together and try and figure out a way to prevent it. But this seems very similar to a Super League type idea, right? Like, it does seem a step along a parallel path, right, Hayden? Because all these leagues are looking for ways to increase their revenue. The Premier League doesn't need to worry, but these other leagues really, really do, especially Liga 1, for example.
Yeah, I think if we're going to start with the La Liga story, it's very clear. I think the game that they're trying to hold will be in Miami. There is a huge demand. La Liga and European football has a huge increase. The market is big in the U.S. I think we've seen U.S. sports do this with the NBA coming to Europe and to China. We've seen it with the NFL, who have games around the world. That's sort of been built in. And I think the demand for soccer in the U.S. is growing right now. In a recent poll, this is a post by John Mueller, is sort of showing Messi is currently the most popular athlete in the United States, which is, I think, the first soccer player since the poll started in '95. So the most popular athlete on the most popularly growing sports among people age 18 to 40 is in the U.S. Soccer is incredibly popular. MLS is not really able to capture that, and that might be a little conversation we want to slide into afterwards. But there's a huge market here for these La Liga teams, for Premier League teams, things like that, and they realize that like it might be hard because the leagues are dealing with this dual thing of, we want to make the league stronger to make it more appealing, to give more stability and opportunity to lots of clubs. But also, if you're La Liga, you're like, we don't really want to kneecap Barcelona and Real Madrid, because then they won't be able to go on and win in European competition, which is really important for our credibility. And yeah, it's something that those teams and a lot of fans and probably people in the league office will push back on, and will sort of say like, well, look, we don't want to take away from Barcelona and Real Madrid. So if we add revenue, it needs to be from somewhere else. And so you can see the game plan from a business side. It actually makes a lot of sense. And you can hear the fans. The fans already saying, you keep increasing ticket prices. Now you're increasing ticket prices and taking away matches. And not only taking them away, but you're taking them and putting them overseas to places where we can't access them, that are at, maybe not favorable times either for us or for the players. Like, what is happening here? And that's really scary. So you can see both sides of it here, but again, the market side is very much there. There's a huge demand for these teams and for these leagues in North America, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, for people who don't really pay much attention to it, these leagues, like you're saying, they do need to find ways to bring more money in. We've seen Liga get itself into a really sticky situation financially, but La Liga makes the most money of the top 5 leagues after the Premier League, and La Liga plus Liga is kind of where the Premier League is in revenue. The Premier League's revenue is close to Serie A plus the Bundesliga. I mean, it makes so much money. And the Premier League has now brought in rules to try and prevent teams agreeing to join a Super League again, right? They have brought in rules which prevent clubs from joining unapproved competitions. The Premier League Owners Charter, which came in the year after the Super League stuff in 2022, binds owners not to join new competitions outside the Prem. But other teams are dying. Do we need to therefore have a more open mind about how they find this money? Because yeah, like you say, it's really important for La Liga to have Barcelona and Real Madrid to be good, to bring in revenue, but they take a huge share of that revenue, and it's not enough to make the other teams good. So they're stuck in this position where they want to bring in more money as a league, but they can't distribute it the way they want to. Like this, they are stuck. Something has to give.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. Usually it feels like the history is that the thing that brings in money will be the thing that gives, and that is where it will go. There might have to be some negotiation between La Liga and these fan groups to sort of say like, look, this is what we're taking, but this is what we're giving back, sort of bargaining a little bit. But obviously they have the power to create this. Teams like Barcelona and these top teams that are looking for any extra cash that they can spend because they know they've got a lot of competitions. They are looking to add players. Barcelona especially have been handicapped by those finances. They're going to keep looking to do it. They'll take that opportunity if they can get it. So yeah, it's a feels bad for the fans, and I'm not sure which direction this is going to play in. But I think it's worth sort of noting that like it's hard in football because football is a sport with so much tradition, so much history. But some of the ideas like Ted talked about changing around some of the competition structures that we have in European football, and maybe removing some competitions that are even by clubs deemed as less valuable or less interesting in the exchange for new competition formats and new revenue opportunities that can then be used to power that. Yeah, it feels like that's an avenue that if you're, instead of just saying, no, we don't want anything to change, we do need to think about the ways in which we can create a really good ecosystem for the sport to continue to grow and develop. And I think it's hard because like the La Liga, these teams in Europe, like we're also running into a little bit of the identity issue of like who is allowed to be a fan of these teams. And I think we had Ravi on the pod, and Ravi is an unbelievably knowledgeable soccer fan and incredibly passionate about Villarreal. and Ravi doesn't live there and isn't
Hmm.
able to go to a game every week. But Ravi will always watch and is up to date on all the news of the club and communications. And again, has like partially of his own desire and part of being a fan. He's like learned Spanish so that he can be really connected to this. And that's really, really special. I think we shouldn't be talking about like, this is just a sellout for money. Like there are so many Barcelona fans in Miami. Barcelona probably wants to get to the team to Miami as well as these places in Asia and all over to satisfy fans, to both bring in revenue,
Hmm.
but also to like be the type of club that they want to be that services that. And so, I think the conversation needs to be more around creating a sustainable ecosystem through competitions that these clubs can agree to, as opposed to them just sort of feeling like we've got so many obligations, but we just need to add a few more to make a bit more money. I think that's a better conversation to have of like, how can we structure this in a good way, as opposed to like, well, all the games have to be played here because the only fans of the team are in this one location, which I think is
Hmm.
not the case.
To go back to what you were saying before we wrap this segment up, why do you think that MLS has not been able to fully capture the desire of the American audience to get more football? Like, what? Why do you think they still turn to European competition?
Yeah, so for me, I I had this conversation with my dad actually the other day, who was asking like, what does MLS sort of need to do? And I sort of have like a 3-step plan that's like
Hmm.
relatively short term. Like I think step one is that MLS needs to have more clarity around the roster rules, salary cap, and those mechanisms. I think it's sort of something that's been added on piece by piece over the years to satisfy owners and to be gradual. But I think the lack of clarity there is really tough for soccer fans that are fans of European soccer, who usually understand either that they support a top team and budget is almost always no issue,
Hmm.
or and so basically the market is whoever we like we can bring in and we just need to get the best ones, or teams understand essentially whatever we sell we can bring in, that's the amount, whatever we sell a player for, that's now our budget, we can use that to sign players.
Hmm.
And I think in MLS, uh, understanding the trading of, again, like league currency for things like international roster places and things like player discovery, they make it more opaque and make it harder for soccer fans who are clearly
Hmm.
very interested in European soccer, in the Euros, the World Cup, these big competitions. It makes it hard for them to understand what they can support. Like they can't just come in and be like, well, I want my player to sign this guy, my team to sign this guy. Well, he's not accessible because of 3 different salary mechanisms. Well, that's not very fun. That's a high barrier to entry. So I think that's one.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
also fixing this too will enable more sort of fantasy gaming, and the opportunity, like fantasy sports and things like that, are really good for helping fans recognize team players and names and get
Hmm.
more tied into weekly results, which I think my impression is that MLS is a great fan experience. It's something that people enjoy when they go to in the stadium, but they don't keep track of how the team's results are, or results around the league are week to week, or watch on TV and that kind of thing. And so I think cleaning up the roster rules enables an easier ecosystem into that sort of experience, where people can understand what goes into building the team. They recognize the players' names, and they see how the results are going. And the third one is the biggest one that I really thought MLS was going to fix with the newest Apple TV deal, which is the storytelling side of it. I think the Welcome to Wrexham and the story of Wrexham has been really compelling in the US. And I think that's been something that for me has shown a spotlight on the need in MLS to tell, maybe tell different stories, or tell stories in a better way to really capture the audience. Because I think
Hmm.
two Hollywood guys buying a team, like promotion relegation isn't why the Wrexham story is compelling. Like the town of Wrexham to some extent is not entirely necessarily like unique to the EFL or the football pyramid. It's
Sure.
something where there are lots of small teams in towns that used to have more industry and things like that. Maybe not as big a fan base as Wrexham, also not in Wales, which is another kind of ripple with that sort of cultural side to it. But to some extent, it's that the let's just say the crew around Rob and Ryan have been able to tell lots of really good stories about what makes the town special and who are the different people who are interested in it. And they've got former players and former staff and current players and staff, and they've done that really well. And I think sometimes with the MLS, the stories that we try to tell are about MLS being kind of maybe glamorous or exciting. It's in New York, it's in LA, it's got Messi, it's got Heung-Min Son, it's got Zlatan Ibrahimovic at one point. Like MLS has tried to go with this sort of maybe glamour route, and I think actually MLS's history is a lot about survival. It's a league that really struggled to exist. It's a league where a lot of the owners put in a ton of money that just got eaten up year after year to keep the league going because they believed in it. And I even think about simple content around like take a player from one of the first few seasons in the league, take a player from, an ex-player from a year after David Beckham came to the league, and just fly them to a game and record their experience. Let them like see the facilities, meet the people, talk about what the fan stadium experience is like and how different it was from what they did, and pull up some archive footage and pull up some archive match footage. And like, that's a really simple thing that costs like, again, a plane ticket and a hospitality experience for one of these guys. That's a great story of the MLS surviving, coming to new markets, building new fans. Like again, my experience in MLS is like, I would go once a year for my birthday. Like, and what did that look like? And how has that sort of changed what fans had experience to compared to people who, again, the teams didn't exist beforehand when they were growing up. So I think that's been a missed opportunity of MLS to really tell these compelling stories and get fans on board. And that's you're always going to run a challenge when the European leagues are sort of the top product with the most history, because to some extent people do want to see the highest quality of something, but it's not the only thing that people care about. It's really not. It's not just again, in American sports, people love college football, and it's not the same level as the NFL, but it has tons and tons of fans because of the history, because of the stories it's able to bring, because of the rivalries and things like that. And that's the thing I think MLS can do a better job with. So that's sort of my 3-step bit here. And it's sad because, to reference where we started with this, MLS has the most popular athlete in the world, and soccer among people aged 18 to 40 is the most like growing sport in terms of popularity of people like watching it and being invested in it. So there's a huge opportunity here, and MLS is sort of not capturing it. And it's something that hopefully MLS is able to do at some point. But those are some of the things I think I'd like to see them do.
So closing the romance gap feels like it's part of it. Like you see, no, it's true. Like the way I see Americans talk about college football or baseball, certainly, like there is a romance to it. And certainly that is felt in football, in soccer, in Europe. That's clearly something that MLS needs to find a way to transmit to its fans, because it'll be there. Like at the international level, like international football in the US, when you think about like the women's national team, for example, you're like, romance is kind of baked into it in a way, because like people playing for their countries, and it's very easy for people to have a rooting interest in a national game. Like, I am from that country, or I don't really like that country. Like there's a beef baked in a way that there isn't with just like this random team from this random city. Like you need to understand the characters of those teams and the history of those teams to really have a rooting interest for or against them. So I don't know, man. Like that'd be interesting to see. And who knows? Maybe they'll start to take some of your opinions on board, Hayden. Like because they're going to have to do something. Like the idea can't be, well, we import games from other leagues and maybe that will continue to grow things for us.
That hurt. Yeah, it's tough because the MLS really is competing against that, because Barcelona playing here isn't going into MLS revenues, so that's going to be competition. They need to find a way to do that. It's a big opportunity here with the World Cup coming to the US.
Sure.
I think Apple and MLS are both banking on that for excitement, and it's going to be important that they capture that maybe in a stronger way, and we'll see what they do. We'll see what they choose to do here. But it's a big opportunity. It's a market that is definitely desiring football, that is desiring soccer and more of it. But But right now, I think MLS is losing out to some of the European
Mhm.
competition in that interest. So we'll see what they can do to try to combat that.
Okay, well, look, we're going to wrap up today. We got one last story, and that's a rumor that Mark Guéhi is on the radar of Bayern. Now, obviously, he's winding down his contract, which means that from January, he can sign a pre-contract deal with a team outside the UK. Barcelona have been linked, Real have been linked, and Bayern linked most strongly. There's a little bit of uncertainty around their centre-backs, Kim Min-jae and Dao Upamecano. Real Madrid, as we know, want to add a centre back, but up until now, we've largely seen them linked with Ibrahima Konate. I also think that when it comes to Real Madrid, they probably need better aerial players. Like, that is one of the weaker parts of Guéhi's game. And, you know, if you want to understand details of why I'm saying that, I would check out Neil's breakdown of Real Madrid's defensive issues in last week's newsletter, which I think is really comprehensive. But it is one of the weaker areas of his game. You know, he's like a 50 to 55% aerial duel winner historically. He's like under 6 feet. But this is a guy who just turned 25. He's an England international. We've seen him play in a more defensive setup. We've seen him play in a back four, in a back three. We've also seen him look pretty good stepping into a higher line, more possession heavy team when he plays with England. Like, this is an opportunity for sides to pick up, I would say, not an outstanding centre back, but like a good, very, very solid centre back. And Bayern Munich have historically normally employed at least one erratic centre back. So Guéhi would probably help them out quite a bit.
Yeah, looking at the options, I think for me, I tend to agree. Real Madrid feels a bit more unlikely, even though Real Madrid loves these pre-contracts and getting business done in advance. I think it's sort of not the exact profile that they need. Again, I think I said on the pod earlier, I thought that if Palace can sort of steady the ship, then they try to sell Guéhi in January and get a bit of a fee, obviously a fraction of the fee they would have gotten from Newcastle or from Liverpool in this latest window. So I still kind of think that that's what's going to happen, that Guéhi will sort of see that as like a little bit doing right by the club. And if Palace are not really in European contention, but not really in relegation contention, then they're comfortable selling, then it might just sort of be a win-win for everybody involved. I would say I really think the Liverpool one made sense, but like me and you have been big on this, like, should Liverpool be playing a back three? Because if they're trying to play a back three or go between 3 and 4, he's a really good fit. He's a right footer that plays on the left that can do a lot of the ball playing stuff that Van Dijk does. He's got a good physical profile. Again, like, he feels like a guy that could both play alongside Van Dijk or if they played a back three, he'd play on the left and Van Dijk could be through the middle. Like, there's actually a lot of options. I really like the fit with Liverpool a lot. The Bayern one was really interesting because it's not one that I necessarily thought tons of, but I think it is a type of fit that company will like. A guy that's really competent and safe in possession, that can play on either side in that back line. I see it. I still think my gut says, like, deal done in January for Liverpool. That still feels like the one for me, but it's a really interesting player, and I think it's a great one when we talk to kind of close the loop on the start of the podcast, was like, how do these players and teams make these responsible decisions about their career paths and development? With Guéhi, he's set it up where I'll take another example of a player that's in this sort of England center back pool of Ezri Konsa, right? Who maybe isn't in the same moment and excitement as Guéhi in terms of the club's interested in him, and that's partly because of how Guéhi has timed, like, this contract cycle. Him being in this position where the contract does wind down. Obviously, he could have moved. Palace, it seems like, turned down offers for him to do that, but he's put himself in a really good position to where he's very desirable. He's a great squad building fit for top teams, even if he's not the top center back. And so, yeah, well done to his management on that side and getting him into a good spot. And for the teams looking at him, I still think it would behoove these teams to try to get something done in January and make a move for him in January instead of try to hold on. Just I think that might be something that Palace allow, but we'll have to see how Guéhi feels about it. That he really does have a lot of power in this situation.
Yeah, and he'd have to give up some of his money in order to get some money for Palace at that stage, right? Because when you're in the last 6 months of your deal, you would be a little bit tempted to ring Trent Alexander-Arnold and say, how much money did did you get? Yeah, it's an interesting player, and I think like him going on a free to a top side, I can get much more on board with than Newcastle trying to pay 60 mil for him, a season and a half ago. I think that just about wraps us for today, Hayden. Look, we are going to be starting a third episode on Patreon very soon. We will be inviting you guys to sign up. We will have links, etc. But in the meantime, what we would really like from you all are topics. We want the players, the teams, the managers that you want deep dives into, the hot topics that there are in football right now, like, playing matches abroad, for example. We want all this stuff from you. We want questions so that we can build up a bank of them and we can start to work through them. And that way, when the Patreon comes, it'll really be a show that you guys have helped shape with us. So please do get your questions and you can just drop them in the comments below and we will add them to our little bank and we'll let you know when we start producing those videos. Hayden, people are going to hear more from you when we do start the third episode. But in the meantime, if they can't get enough and during the international break, they desperately need their His for Football, they can find you on social media, right?
Yeah. I'm H Van Brewer on Blue Sky. You'll see me with football takes, but also responding and commenting on stuff in the newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, definitely do that. I think a lot of the stuff there, both Kim's writing is excellent, but also some of our guest writers, Mohammed. We had Catalina Bush on for some of the transfer grades or the previews, the Premier League previews. So I think keep an eye on that space because I think what we're really trying to do is cover a breadth of topics around the sport, both what's it like inside clubs, how do you make these transfer decisions, what is it like working with data, what are differences between again we'll see Ted's journey in the women's game and what that sort of looks like. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff and definitely keep your eyes on that and comment and let us know because I think for us, we want to keep that engaged. It is really important that the questions and things people are interested in, we're responding to.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much to all of you for listening or watching. Please do follow us, like the videos, subscribe to the channel, all that kind of stuff. And we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.